I'm recording. Hey, we are factoring by grouping today. Go ahead and throw your name on here. It is currently second hour. Alright, so we have learned how to factor the greatest common factor out in 5.5. We have learned how to factor a quadratic yesterday in 5.6. We are skipping over 5.7. 5.7 is this one super special easy thing. So we're skipping over that. You guys will do that Monday without me. Today we are factoring by grouping. Factoring by grouping is what we use when there are 4 terms, and those 4 terms do not have a GCF across all of them. If there was something we could pull out of all of them, we would. But if those 4 terms don't start with the GCF, this is what we're going to use. The steps to factoring by grouping are to factor out the GCF of the first 2 terms, and then to factor out the GCF of the last 2 terms. Thank you. There we go. Once we have that, what is left behind is going to match. So what is left behind after you take out the GCF of the first 2, and after you take the GCF out of the last 2, is going to match. You are going to write in your factored form, you're going to pull those parentheses that match out, and then your other factor is going to be your first GCF plus your second GCF. And I put a hit there. If your third term is negative, your second GCF will also be negative, or will always be negative, okay? So we're going to go through. We've got 3 examples here for you to see this. Let's get started with the first one. Come grab a note sheet, please. Oh, thank you. Okay, so I like to take this and literally split it up into these 2 terms and these 2 terms. Like, it's called factoring by grouping because you're literally doing it in 2 groups. So out of x cubed minus 3x squared, we are trying to find the GCF out of those 2 terms. There's an imaginary 1 in front, but 1 and 3 I couldn't divide anything out of. There's an x cubed and an x squared. I can pull out that x squared. So the GCF out of my first 2 terms is x squared. So write that down if you'd like. And then we're going to pull that out. So x squared, when we factor out a GCF, we are subtracting our exponents. So 3 minus 2 is 1. Leaves behind just x. And then negative 3x squared, divide out the x squared, is negative 3. Okay. We are now going to do the same thing with our last 2 terms. So we need to factor the greatest common factor out of 15x and 45. What can I divide 15 and 45 both by? 15. So I think about time, and I know that 15, 30, 45, 60, those are like 15 minutes on the hour. I can divide both those by 15. So I'm going to divide out of 15. So I'm going to put plus 15 there. 15x, I divide out the 15. That leaves me either x or 1x. And then negative 45 divided by 15 leaves behind negative 3. Okay, so this right here is the magic of factoring by grouping. If a problem can be factored by grouping, which not every polynomial with 4 terms can be factored by grouping. All the ones that we're going to give you and ask you to factor by grouping, though, can be factored by grouping. So this is the magic of factoring by grouping. What is left behind is the exact same. So this x minus 3 and this x minus 3 are the exact same. If they are not the exact same, and you're working on one of your assignments that you are specifically being told to factor by grouping, that means you went wrong somewhere. If they're in life outside of this class, it might also mean that you can't factor that by grouping, because not everything can be factored by grouping. But if you know something can be factored by grouping, and those aren't the same, that means you went wrong somewhere. We're not done yet. Okay, so that x minus 3 is now a common factor between this whole piece and this whole piece. So we are able to pull that out, the parentheses that match. That is going to be the first part of our answer. And then the other part of our answer is going to be this x squared and this 15. They are going to come together to make another term, or another binomial. So x squared plus 15. Okay, any questions there? Okay, let's look at our next one then. So we've got 2x cubed minus 4x squared. What can I divide 2 and 4 both by? 2. So my GCF is going to be 2. And then how many x's can I pull out? Yep, so 2x squared. Awesome. So I can pull out 2x squared out of those first two terms. 2x cubed divided by 2x squared. The 2 divided by 2 is 1. I'm not going to write down the 1. X cubed, take away the x squared. 3 minus 2 just leaves me 1x behind. Negative 4x squared divided by 2x squared. Negative 4 divided by 2 is going to be negative 2. X squared divided by x squared completely factors out. Okay, any questions about that? Hey, then let's look at our second group. We've got negative x minus 2. Or negative x plus 2, sorry. There is no common factor between x and 2. Because the only thing I could pull out of x would be an x, and the only thing I could pull out of 2 would be a 1 or a 2. But, I can. But dividing by 1 doesn't change anything for right now. But I know I need to leave behind an x minus 2. This is currently negative x plus 2. I need it to be positive x minus 2. So this was that hint that I put here. If your third term is negative, your second GCF will always be negative. So in order to leave behind an x minus 2, we need to divide out the greatest common factor here of just negative 1. So out of these last two terms, we're going to divide out a negative 1. So negative x divided by negative 1 is positive x. And then 2 divided by negative 1 is negative 2. So anytime your third term, 1, 2, third term is negative, that number there is going to be negative. And then your GCFs should match, or your, like what remains should match. Your parentheses, that should match. So I've got x minus 2. Those guys match. That makes my first binomial. And then my second binomial is 2x squared minus 1. 2x squared minus 1. If I were to multiply this out using one of those 2x2 boxes, none of my terms would combine, and then if I put them in standard form, it would give me exactly that, if I were to multiply it up. Hey, last ones. 8x cubed plus 20x squared. What can I divide 8 and 20 both by? 4. Awesome. And then I've got x cubed and x squared. I can pull out an x squared. So I've got 4x squared I can pull out of these first two. Go ahead and do that. 4x squared. 8 divided by 4 is 2. Subtract my exponents. 3 minus 2 is 1. So it's just x to the first, or just 2x. 20x squared divided by 4x squared. The 20 divided by 4 is 5. And then x squared factors out completely. Hey, for my second GCF, what can I divide 6 and 15 both by? 3. And then because this is minus 6 here, because my first, second, third term is negative, I want to divide by a negative 3. I'm going to divide a negative 3 out of those last ones. So I've got negative 3. Negative 6x divided by negative 3 is positive 2x. Negative 15 divided by negative 3 is positive 5. Okay, that leaves behind a 2x plus 5 that matches, so that's going to be the first part of my answer. And then this 4x squared and this minus 3 become the second part of my answer. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop this video.